What Wall Streeters are saying right now in light of this new report finding that federal prosecution of financial fraud has fallen to a 2-decade low under the Obama administration. I'm David Sirota filling in for Tom Hartman. We've been having a pretty contentious discussion. I'm getting your emails at davidsirota.com. If you want to weigh in on the discussion, you can email me. Feel free to do that, or give us a call, 866-987-TOM. That's 866-987-8466. Or if you're a conservative, 866-745-2667. That's 866-745-CONS. We got a busy hour coming up, as always. Coming up at 19 after the hour, the latest new base in the American Imperial Project. Why are we setting up a new base in Australia? And what does it have to do with China? That's coming up. But right now, as I said, federal prosecution of financial fraud falling to a 2-decade low, according to new Justice Department figures. What does it mean? And are folks on Wall Street as excited as Jerry Maguire? Are they screaming, "Show me the money"? Or have we already really shown them the money? Joining us now to break down this report is Rolling Stone magazine's award-winning reporter, Matt Taibbi. Matt, thanks for your time. The question I have in this report is a talking point. It's a question about a talking point that comes up often. Well, say some Wall Street apologists, say some defenders of the Obama administration, the prosecution levels have gone down because the folks on Wall Street didn't do anything illegal. Maybe they did something immoral. Maybe they've done things that aren't very nice. Maybe they have done things that aren't very right. But the laws were such that they were allowed to do what they did in advance of the meltdown, in advance of the housing collapse. What's your response to that?
No, I mean, that's absolutely crazy. William Black, who was a former federal regulator, he estimated that during this period of the mortgage bubble that there were probably 1 million fraud cases a year going on. There was an epidemic of fraud across the entire industry during this whole period of the mortgage bubble that began with companies like Countrywide and New Century, which were serially committing fraud in giving out mortgages to people who probably shouldn't have gotten mortgages. They were falsifying FICO scores. They were falsifying income levels. They were giving to people who didn't have identification, who weren't citizens. And then they were taking those loans, and banks like Goldman Sachs and Citigroup were knowingly packaging those loans that they knew were defective or fraudulent to other insurance companies, to pension funds, and that was fraud too. When you take a knowingly defective product and you market it as something that isn't defective. Aside from that, there are hundreds of whistleblowers who have brought complaints to the SEC for an astounding variety of crimes, ranging from Enron-style accounting fraud. I was yesterday interviewing a whistleblower who witnessed an extraordinary amount of fraud at one of the major credit card companies. They were selling defective credit card accounts to debt buyers. There's so much fraud that for prosecution levels to decline is just basically unfathomable.
Is it possible that they've declined, and I don't want to go out of my way to be an apologist for the Obama administration, is it possible they've declined because one of these situations where there's so much fraud, as you say, that they don't even know where to start? Could that be it, or is there something else going on?
I don't think that's what it is. I think that the Obama administration has largely accepted the talking point explanation that most of what went on was legal. I'll give you an example. You had the SEC brought a fraud case against Goldman Sachs for a deal called Abacus, where they misrepresented how a bunch of mortgages or mortgage-backed assets were picked when they were selling them to a couple of European banks. Abacus was just one of many deals where basically the same kinds of fraud were going on, but the SEC decided only to pursue this one case, even though they had evidence of 4 or 5 other basically identical cases. We had a similar situation last week with Citigroup, where they were only prosecuted really for one case where they had 5 or 6 in the can that they could have brought. So even when they had the evidence to bring these cases, they didn't do it, and they didn't bring in criminal cases. They only did civil settlements with all these people. So that's not a valid excuse.
What about this notion that this may ultimately, this is not just about prosecuting people who did the crime, on Wall Street in the past, that if the Obama administration, if even state attorneys generals don't prosecute people, it will create almost a legally binding precedent that this kind of thing will be allowed. Is there a danger of that?
Absolutely. I think the best evidence you can get of that is the foreclosure scandal, where you look and essentially every one of these companies, these big banks that is bringing all these foreclosure actions, they're committing mass perjury essentially by robo-signing these documents. You know, they've obtained these mortgages and they don't have the documentation to show the chain of custody, how they obtained them. So they put these, 22-year-old kids in back rooms and they tell them to sign affidavits saying they have personal knowledge of how the bank came to obtain this property. That's perjury. And they're doing it in a sort of factory-style fashion where they're having people sign 400, 500, 1,000 documents a day. When the government overlooks, 1,000 cases of perjury a day, that's the precedent that crime is just not going to be prosecuted.
Or at least white-collar crime. I mean,
right.
What's interesting about this is happening at a time when so many police resources, law enforcement resources, and you made this point very eloquently in one of your recent articles, that so many law enforcement resources are being thrown at criminalizing basic free speech, the Occupy Wall Street movements all across the country. I mean, we're here in Denver. The news is this morning that if you honk in support of the Occupy Denver folks down near the state capitol, you are now getting a ticket. Literally, the police are assessing people tickets for this. So it's certain kinds of crime. Now let's try to get to maybe a glimmer of good news. And again, on the line with us is Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone magazine. The new report out this week: financial prosecutions have hit a 2-decade low under the Obama administration. Yesterday, the Nevada Attorney General threw the book at mortgage fraudsters or alleged mortgage fraudsters, 606 felony and gross misdemeanor charges for supervising the robo-signing of documents to speed foreclosures on Nevada residences. Is there a chance that we'll see some good news, if not from the Obama administration, then from various state attorneys generals? What's within their power to do? Is it possible that state attorneys generals, if they got really aggressive, they could actually clean up some of this mess?
Absolutely, because the states were one of the primary victims of the fraud that went on, because the banks, by what they were doing is they were using a private mortgage registration system. In the old days, when you sold a mortgage, you had to go to your local county office and sign a document and register that sale, and you had to pay a fee. You had to pay a little tax to transfer a mortgage. Well, the banks kind of unilaterally decided they didn't want to do that anymore, so they created this private company called MERS that transferred all these mortgages electronically for much, much less than they would have had to pay if they had done it legally. And so all of these states were cheated out of hundreds of millions of dollars in what essentially was tax revenue because the paperwork wasn't done. So all of these states are now some of them are aggressively trying to recoup that lost money, and I think they have a very good case that they could make a lot of that money back. The Dallas, Texas, for instance, is suing one of the big banks. I think it's Bank of America for $50 million for lost revenue. So, and
this is where it's going. This is where it's going to have to go, is to the states if the Obama administration won't act. Matt Taibbi, the award-winning Rolling Stone magazine reporter, thanks so much for your time today.
All right, thanks, David. Take care.